So today we're going to talk to you about the Code of Ethics for Arkansas educators. We work for the Professional Licensure Standards Board, and a little bit of fun this morning. Who doesn't love The Office?
I got it. I got it.
I took you to an intimate restaurant. Vendor was suggesting moving. And on the left, the jaws of thousands horizontally.
Let's get ethical, ethical. I wanna get ethical.
Uh-oh. So today we are going to go through the Professional Licensure Standards Board process, our investigative process. We're going to talk to you about the 8 standards. We're going to give you some resources and where to find those, go through continuing education for the Code of Ethics, and then we will talk you through some case scenarios. So first, who are we? So we were, in 2008, we were established through legislation, and we are a unit within DESE that investigates educators accused of violating the Code of Ethics. So our unit, we have a managing attorney who is our director. We have a licensing attorney, 2 legal service specialists. Sarah and I are the senior investigators, 3 additional educational investigators, and then 2 administrative assistants. Our investigative team has a pretty diverse background. We have a former administrator. I taught SPED. Sarah taught secondary ed. We have a former elementary ed teacher, and then a former law enforcement officer. So our team is pretty diverse and covers the educational field. So who do we investigate? We investigate all licensed educators. So typically you think of those as your classroom teachers or your administrators. But if you have people in your building who are a licensed educator and maybe are working in a paraprofessional, let's say they've gotten out of college and they've taken a paraprofessional job to get some experience, if they are licensed, they fall within our jurisdiction. We also investigate educators employed under a waiver. Those may be your educators who are working in a charter school, educators who are working under a long-term sub waiver, and then also your pre-service teacher. These are going to be your teachers who are enrolled in ed prep programs, so undergraduate students and also graduate students. So we do not have authority to investigate classified staff unless they hold a valid teaching license. So why are ethics important? Why are we talking about this today? The Code of Ethics holds us accountable as educators to a high standard of professionalism inside and outside of our classrooms. All of our actions have an impact on students. They have an impact on the districts you work for and the communities that you serve. And the impact sometimes can be negative. So prior to 2008, teachers who were in trouble for misconduct would simply resign from their district and district hop. And so there was no way of tracking them. There was no way of providing some rehabilitative services for them and getting them training that they may need to prevent this behavior in the future.
Okay, so when do we get involved? So for us to get involved, there is an allegation of violation form. It can be found on our website, which we're going to show you our website a little later, show you where to find that form. But it has to be received by our office. It is signed under penalty of perjury, and we do have to have an original signature. So all of those violation forms have to actually be mailed to us so that we can have the original signature. Now, sometimes people will hand deliver them to our office, but we can't accept faxes or emails at this time of those complaints. Once it's received, the complaint is validated. So either myself or Jacqueline will call the complainant. We'll ensure that they're the person who did actually fill out that form and sign it to submit. And then we ask a couple of other questions, just general questions. Can I get some more information? See if there's anything else that, other documents that they might need to send to us. Sometimes they'll say that there's videos. We'll go ahead and have them email us those videos so that we can get those in.
One thing people ask us, Sarah, is who can submit? Who can submit an allegation concerning an educator?
So anyone can submit an allegation to us. It can be an administrator, another teacher, it can be a parent, it can be a concerned citizen. We have got them where it says other concerned citizen, and it's just someone in the community that has heard about something that has been done, and they'll go ahead and submit that form to our office. And it just goes through the same process. So we receive it, we validate it, and then it goes for authorization or denial. So what that means is it's going to go before our ethics subcommittee. And our ethics subcommittee, we're going to talk about them. I'll just in a minute tell you a little bit more about who that ethics subcommittee is, but they're going to look at all of the complaints. They meet once a month, and they're going to say, if everything were true in this allegation, would it be a violation of the code of ethics? If they say yes, it would be a violation, they go ahead and they authorize that case. If they say no, then it gets denied. So they have the option to either authorize or deny each allegation. So after it is authorized or denied, it gets assigned to one of the 5 investigators here and goes through an investigation process. We will speak with any individual that has firsthand knowledge of what the conduct that is being alleged to be unethical. We speak with them, whether that be administrators, students, other parents, whoever it is that has that, we go out, we interview them. We can either go to the district, sometimes we do it by phone. We've been doing a lot of phone interviews this year and then after we get all of the interviews complete, we compose what's called the final report of the investigation. So the final report just basically has what everything said. We don't make any type of decisions as investigators. All we do is we fact find. So we compile that all into that final report, and that only goes to the educator. So if you are under investigation, that doesn't go to any parent, it doesn't go to anyone else in the school district except for you, whoever you share it with. The educator then has a chance where they can respond to that final report before it goes back before the same subcommittee for initial determination and recommendation. So we're going to stop right here for a second, and we're going to talk about what that initial determination and recommendation is. So how is a determination made? So it is that same subcommittee that authorized or denied. So they get everything back before them. It's a subcommittee of your peers. There are 2 classroom teachers, 2 administrators, and 1 higher ed individual on that board. They look at everything that was collected, any supporting documents that are attached to that final report. They read the final report. If they have any additional questions, they may call one of us into the room to answer any questions that they may have. And then they make a decision based on preponderance of the evidence. Now, preponderance of the evidence isn't quite as high as what you would see in a court of law. So where you say that it has to be beyond a shadow of a doubt, 99%, anything like that. Preponderance of the evidence is just more likely than not. So 51%. So they will make that decision, and then if they do say that there has been a violation, then they'll make a recommendation. And we're going to go over the recommendations here in just a minute, but we're going to go back to our process now. So we're at the initial determination and recommendation. They've made a decision. They have issued a sanction. The educator has a right where they can request what we call an evidentiary hearing if they decide that they don't like the recommendation. So they can call witnesses, we can call witnesses. It's before a separate panel. So it's a new panel of individuals. That panel can speak directly to the educator, and then they make a decision. So they can go up in a sanction, they may keep the sanction the same, and they can go down in the sanction. It's whatever they decide. Now, whether or not, if there is a recommendation, it will always end up at that state board for the final order, because the state board has the final say of whether or not there was that violation. So the state board gets all the information, they look at it, sometimes they ask questions and different things like that.
And so we often get asked, well, how long is this process? So standard process, pending, there aren't attorneys involved, there aren't criminal charges, there's not a child maltreatment investigation. This process from receipt to final order is approximately 6 months, 4 to 6 months on a fast case. We have had some cases that have been in our office for 2 years. So it really depends on the case, but this is not a swift process. This is, it definitely takes time, and we're definitely involved with you for a period of time.
And the educator has multiple due process rights throughout that process. So they have chances to respond to final reports, to look at those initial determinations or recommendations, to consider, they have due process rights the whole way through. It's not a speedy process.
Absolutely. So what is the impact on the educator? Typically, people think of, I have a license or my license has been revoked, and there actually are 5 sanctions. For licensed educators, the letter of caution, and licensed educators and those employed under waiver, the letter of caution is private. It is a letter from the subcommittee that goes to the educator that discusses the conduct, but it remains private. No one else has access to it. The other 4 are public. They're public knowledge. They are, and we'll show you where they are on the website. But there is a letter of caution, there's a written reprimand, there is a probation, a suspension, and a revocation. The top 3, the letter of caution, the written reprimand, and the probation, allow the educator to remain in the classroom. The suspension and the revocation obviously take the educator out. Suspension can be a short-term suspension. We have seen 6 months up to 5 years. So it can be a short-term suspension or a long-term suspension. The same with the probations. And then your educators that are not licensed but are under a waiver, there just are levels of notification that correspond kind of directly with what you see for the licensed educators. But there's 5 possible sanctions. So when we talk about the impact and talking about being public knowledge, it goes to the state board. Everything for the state board is public information. And it also is displayed on our website. So here you'll see a screenshot of our website. So you'll see final state board orders. So we cut it off just for privacy for this training. But on our website, under May 13th, 2021, you can see educators who receive discipline. And when you are searching for a job, this is our AILS system. When you're searching for a job, potential employers search this to make sure that you have a valid license and that you have background checks, things like that. If you are currently under a sanction, you have a big red banner on your license. So you can see here that it says the current license status is revoked. And I'm going to put just to right here where it says ethics viewable under Act 1323 of 2013, yes. This will only say yes when it is sexual in nature. So you can have an ethics violation and it not be sexual in nature and it would not be viewable.
All right, so we're going to take you through a little bit of our data. Me and Jacqueline love data, so we decided to include some of it in our presentation today. So right now we're sitting at that we have received 115 complaints for the 2020-2021 school year, and we go from July 1 to June 30th. So this is our last month, but we haven't actually met yet with our subcommittee. They actually meet tomorrow. So our numbers will actually change a little bit as of tomorrow, but our current data is that we have received 115, we have authorized 55. This is a breakdown of where the educator was working. So, you know, sometimes you might see coach, and you might see classroom teacher, and you might be like, well, they're both. But we classify individuals based on the position they were in when the allegation of the violation occurred. So was that coach acting in their capacity as a coach out on the football field, at the basketball, wherever they may coach, or were they actually in the classroom when this happened? And so as you can see, classroom teachers, 58.2%. Of course, you know, classroom teachers make up the majority of the educators in the state, so they usually are our highest. Here's our gender. So we have 61.8% male this year, which is actually
A change.
a change. Usually females make up the most cases, but this year males are edging out the females. And then here is our offenses that we have investigated so far this year. You can see that we have inappropriate interactions, inappropriate communication with a student. Now that's going to be your non-sexual communication, and then the next line down is going to be the sexual communication. So we can separate that out. Sexual contact, physical contact. You can see as they go on down to the testing violation, kind of what we have investigated as we're going through our year. And of course, like we said, tomorrow, all of these numbers will change because they'll meet again. Now, this is actually who has reported. So like we said earlier, anyone can report. So far this year, 78.2% of our allegations have been received from administrators. 12.7% are from parents, and 9.1%, so almost 10% of our complaints have been have been concerned citizens, grandparents, aunts, friend of a friend who have just heard what's happening and they submit these allegations to us. Now these are our authorized investigations. These aren't just the out of the 115. Okay.
So let's go through the 8 standards. Our first standard is a very broad standard. And it talks about that the educator maintains a professional relationship with each student, both inside and outside of the classroom. So the guidance that is given is that you should be promoting mental, emotional, and physical health of students at all times. You should not be demeaning them, harassing them, not participating in bullying, not stopping bullying. Would fall in that. Maintain professional relationships with students while using social media, and maintain a positive educator and student authority when expressing concern and empathy and encouragement. And so when we talk about social media, we get several cases in our office every year around social media and the use of social media. And there are amazing ways to use social media for the classroom. We've seen a lot of, I believe there's a teacher in Malvern that's doing these amazing TikToks on teaching grammar. We've seen really a lot of, you guys are very innovative and do a lot of amazing things using social media. We unfortunately also see a lot of educators that reach out to students to pursue relationships. They do grooming, which is where you're preparing them for a sexual relationship through social media. So when you are communicating with your students, both inside and outside of the classroom, do you want to be mindful of, is this communication transparent? So when you communicate with students through like the GroupMe app, it does keep a record. So if a parent says, well, they never said this to me, or they never did this, you have a documentation of all of the exchanges, all the communication that has gone back and forth. Whereas we have educators who say that they use Snapchat to communicate lesson plans and lesson requirements. So those are, that's not a transparent way to communicate, and it really opens yourself up to really an investigation.
We've never heard a good reason why someone is Snapchatting their students. There's
No.
always there's always those positive ways to use the social media.
Absolutely, and it's things that they post on your own social media that may have an impact on students that you serve. So this standard is pretty broad. This goes Standard 2 goes right along with Standard 1, and actually Standard 2 is our most investigated standard. So when you come into our office and we receive an allegation and it's authorized, it can be authorized for numerous standards. So when we see Standard 1, we almost always see Standard 2 attached. And Standard 2 goes along with your professionalism, your inclusive of professional and ethical behaviors, your skills, your knowledge, your dispositions, and your responsibilities within your organization. So if you are, let's say you are Snapchatting with a student inappropriate, it's gonna fall under professionalism also because you're not maintaining the integrity of your position.
Girls, what was the total number of cases?
The total number of
Total number of
authorized,
Authorized cases,
115.
115 were received.
Oh, received,
There
I'm
were
sorry.
55 that were authorized.
Okay, so we have a question in about the percentage of that were testing violations. And so the people watching, when they look at that, when they look at the slide where you've got the bar and they look at the amount there, can we say that the testing violations would be 2 out of 55 there? Was that the number that we were using?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll answer the question for you.
And so with your standard 2 guidance is that you have an obligation to implement best practices and maintain confidence in your skills and your knowledge. You have a responsibility to exercise professionalism at all times and competence within interacting in the school community. You also can see standard 2 violations, not even necessarily between student and teacher, but teacher and teacher. So am I maintaining professionalism when I am working with Sarah? Am I, or we have had cases where we've had educators who were physically fighting in the hallways. So that's going to come into your standard 2.
So standard 3 is an educator honestly fulfills reporting obligations associated with the professional practices. A lot of people, when they think about this, they think about the reporting the child abuse hotline, which is absolutely one of the main portions of this. It is, you are a mandated reporter. So you always have to make sure that if you suspect some form of child abuse, that you are reporting it. We've had we've seen a lot of this here lately where educators they hear about it, but then they're saying they thought somebody else reported. So that would be like, maybe I go to Jacqueline and I say, hey, this kid, they told me that this happened. And Jacqueline says, okay, I'll take care of it. I'll call the hotline. And then I don't do anything. Me telling Jacqueline and then Jacqueline saying that she's going to call the hotline, that does not fulfill my obligation as a mandated reporter. Now, if Jacqueline and I both know about it and we both sit there together on the phone and call the hotline, then that would be fine. It would cover us both. But you can never delegate your mandated reporter to any other individual. And we have kind of seen that popping up some here lately. This also is, you're honestly reporting the data to, DESE, audit, the Board of Education, any of those state or federal government agencies. So this would mostly be administrators, but it is sometimes teachers too, applying for grants. You can't pad your grant information just to be able to get that grant, no matter how much, you probably really need it. You always have to make sure that you're reporting information correctly. Reporting of grades and attendance. You can't just give a grade to pass a kid. If they have a 59 and you're really just wanting to help them out and bump them up to that 60, you really can't do that because you have to be able to show where they got that grade. Otherwise, you're falsely reporting that information. Same thing with attendance. And also with attendance, there's actually a law that says that if it can be proven that you have falsified an attendance record, that is an automatic revocation of your license. So just always make sure that when you're reporting grades or attendance that you are reporting that honestly. You're also, if it's an administrator, giving information for the recommendation for employment, promotion, or licensure, whether you're reporting to your own school board, whether you're reporting that information to DESE, always make sure that you're giving that information. And that also includes timely submission of information. Okay, so standard.
Ladies, can I interrupt for a question?
Absolutely.
So back on the scenario of reporting suspected child maltreatment. So in that conversation, if you and a colleague both know something has happened and you say, oh, well, I'll go report, or you think the colleague is going to go report. If they bring back and say, here's the identification number, or here's the report number, if you have proof that they reported basically for both of you, does that cover your requirement?
So, I mean, I trust Sarah and I believe Sarah would accurately report. If I was not in the room when she reported, I would absolutely report it myself.
Right.
Just to ensure that the information that you know is reported to the maltreatment hotline, because if they receive both of our phone calls, they'll simply merge them. But I'm not sure what Sarah said. I'm not sure if she explained everything that I know. I don't know exactly what she knows and what she reported. Now, if we were in the room at the same time, absolutely, that's a different. But Sarah saying she reported it and saying, hey, I have this referral number. I do believe her and I believe she would do it. I don't think she would generate a referral number and just go that far. But for me and for my professional license, I would call myself.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on that? Okay. All right, so standard 4 has to do with your responsibility as it comes with public funds or property, school-sponsored activity funds, and the way that you honor and your stewardship of those funds. Now, the guidance on this one, you should be a good steward for public funds, their personal property dedicated to school-related purposes. So you can't just, spend the money however you want. You can't, borrow money from concession stands or school activity funds or anything like that. Even if you say, hey, I'm going to pay this back, I'm doing collections for the yearbook. I need $20 for lunch or whatever it is. I'll just take the 20 from that, put it back. You can't do that. That would still be a standard 4 violation. You always have to make sure that you are, keeping good records, accounting for those. If you are being reimbursed for mileage or anything like that, make sure that you are keeping an accurate total of those. We don't see a lot of standard 4 violations. A lot of times when we do, it doesn't so much have to do with funds, it has more to do with the property. So anything that a school issues you, whether it be a laptop, your desktop computer, an iPhone, an iPad, anything that they might issue you, that is still school property. So you should not be using that for personal use. Now, are we going to come investigate you if during your prep time you check your Gmail? No, we're probably not going to, unless you sync all of your information to your computer and there's inappropriate content. Because then you've got inappropriate content on a public school's device, and you are now subject to the standard 4 violation.
Absolutely, and we've had cases where it was alleged that there was inappropriate use of a school laptop, and what we did is the district did like a data dump and could tell when the websites were accessed. And we matched that up against instructional time. So were you shopping on Amazon when you should have been teaching math?
Right.
So you get into situations like that. With this standard and every other standard, know your district policies.
Right.
Because when they come to us and they say, hey, this was a clear violation of our district computer use policy, most of the time, those cases are authorized for investigation. When you have signs saying that you're aware of the district policies and then you have violated your district policies, those cases are almost always authorized by our ethics subcommittee. Do we have any questions? All right, we'll keep on going. So standard 5 is that you maintain integrity with the acceptance of gratuity, gifts, compensations, or favors that might impair or appear to influence your professional decisions. So I was in an elementary building and they love their elementary teachers. We had all sorts of, I got $10 Sonic gift cards around Christmas time. I got Christmas gifts, Christmas candy, things like that.
Did those impact my decision-making when it came to student grades? No. I don't think, I'm not gonna put my professional license on the line for a $10 Sonic card. But if you were looking at, have you received a $100 gift card and then all of a sudden this student is doing well in your class? How does that, has that impaired your decision-making? Has it influenced, your professional decisions? So you want to make sure that you consider the value of your gift, the reasonable of your gift, the timing of the gifts. So are you getting these gift cards right before grades are due? Also on this one, know your district policy. I know that certain districts have that you have to report, if you receive a gift of more than a value of $20, you have to report it. So make sure you know your district policies and that you are accepting gifts within your district policies. And always, as educators, ask your supervisor. If you're unsure about something, go up the chain of command. So, if you don't take anything else away from this today, know your district policies and, ask your supervisor, talk to your supervisor. With this, not many of us are going to get in situations. We do see this more with admin who are maybe, they're doing purchasing orders for the district and their friend runs a t-shirt shop. And maybe they're going to get some free t-shirts or get a kickback for proceeds ordered, from the t-shirt sales. So those are situations where you get into that. This is not, like I said, this is not your, your 300 teacher mug of the year. That's not impacting anyone's grades. Standard 6 is all things testing. It's that you keep in confidence secure standardized testing materials and results and maintains integrity in regarding those procedures. Prior to giving assessments, you have a training and then you'll sign a testing agreement. If you violate the testing agreement, it can be turned into our office for investigation. It also can go to the Office of Student Assessment, so there could be dual investigations going on. But know your testing policies. Make sure that you are following those. And again, if you have a question, ask someone before you take action. So if you have a question on, I know when I was in the classroom giving the ACT Aspire, they told us that, we received our testing materials in a bucket. And when we were waiting or in between tests, that the materials that if we used the restroom, the bucket had to go with us. Well, I was like, well, take the bucket to the back. They said, yes, the bucket remains with you at all times. So even if you feel like it's a silly question, make sure that you're asking questions and getting clarification, because if you sign the testing agreement and then you violate, any of those, it could be a standard 6 violation. That also goes into, standard 6 is paired with standard 2. So you may be looking at a professionalism, and do you know your professional practices? So just make sure that you know your district policies, know your testing policies.
All right, standard 7 has to do with all of that information that you have to keep confidential. So an educator maintains the confidentiality of information about students and colleagues obtained in the course of the educator's professional services that is protected under state law or regulations, federal law or regulations, or the written policies of the educator's school district, unless disclosure serves a professional purpose as allowed or required by law or regulations. It's a mouthful. And I think that's the reason you wanted the I had to read that one. All right, so standard 7. A lot of the information that you're going to be given, you're going to come across is confidential. So that means that you don't need to talk to your colleagues about that information. If the student's on an IEP or you have the information that the student is on some type of medication for, say, like ADHD or something like that, then you can't disclose that to another educator. So I can't go to Jacqueline and be like, man, little Johnny, I can tell he did not take his ADHD medicine because he's just bouncing all over the place today. Jacqueline doesn't need to know that. That served no educational purpose for me to be discussing that with her. Now, if I need to go to her and ask her a question about, an education, she's a special education teacher. If I need to go to her and be like, hey, I know this student's IEP says this, can you help me with it? That's fine. That is a legitimate purpose that you are going to that teacher and discussing that information with them.
But this also goes to, if you have a student in your classroom who is on ADHD medication, and that particular day they're just particularly hyperactive, and you can't be like, Sarah, did you take your medicine today? No, then you need to go to the nurse. Go to the nurse and take your medicine. That falls under standard 7. That's a violation of confidential information.
Right. This also includes your colleagues. So if I know that Jacqueline, there's something, I can't disclose her information to other colleagues or other students. This includes student academic and disciplinary records. So you can't go talking to your friends down the hall about having to write students up and what you wrote them up for. Family status and or income assessment testing results. You can't discuss that with other educators unless it serves some sort of purpose. So, always make sure when you're having those conversations with your colleagues that you're not just going to a colleague to vent about a student and disclosing information that is protected under this.
Absolutely.
standard.
And then I think also, you'll have situations, or I ran into situations where I lived in the community where I taught,
Mhm.
which I assume most people do. Parents will come up to you and they'll say, oh, what's happening? What's happening with Sarah? I heard that her mom did this is happening, and is this true? That is a violation of her confidentiality, whether it is a colleague, whether it is a student. So this would fall under like sharing business at Walmart. You never know who's around or who's listening. So make sure just that you're disclosing information as necessary and that it serves an educational purpose.
Question,
Okay.
is it possible to privately talk to a student with ADHD and ask if they've had their medicine?
Okay. So the question was, is it possible to privately talk to a student and ask them? If you are privately talking to the student and you're not announcing that to the entire class, you're not calling them out, then you can have a conversation with the student. Right. This standard does not forbid that. Okay, any other questions? All right, no. All right, so standard 8 is probably our most cut and dry standard that we have. An educator while on school premises or at a school-sponsored activity involving students refrains from using and possessing and or being under the influence of alcohol or unauthorized drug substances and or possessing items prohibited by law, possessing or using tobacco or tobacco-related products, e-cigarettes, e-liquid or vapor products, and abusing or misusing prescription medications or other authorized substances as evidenced by impairment while on school premises or at school-sponsored activities involving students.
So these are typically violations in April and May.
Yes, they're about to start rolling in. We haven't had that many, if you remember back to our graph, we haven't had that many yet.
But
They're
they
about to
start
start
being
coming in.
reported.
Because by the end of the year, a lot of times teachers are tired, they're worn out. And so they start making poor decisions. So we're gonna look at our guidance. The guidance basically is what the standard says, because like we said, this is probably our most cut and dry standard. We will say that, like we said, we get a lot of them this year. Or this time of the year, we have teachers who they'll go out to their car, say at lunch or something like that, and they'll drink at their car. They have, whatever kind of alcohol it is, beer, whiskey, vodka, we've seen it all. They'll pour it in a Yeti cup, something like that, and then they'll come back into the school and they've got their drink for the rest of the afternoon. This also covers any type of, even if it is prescription medication, that is impairing your behavior on school property or at school-sponsored events. So if you take some sort of a medicine that is making you kind of, woozy, it says, do not take while operating vehicles. You may also not want to take that while teaching children. That is evidenced by your behaviors.
Absolutely. And also, this talks about at school-sponsored events. So I taught at an elementary school. My daughter was enrolled at the middle school. She was on the middle school dance team. So I went to all the basketball and all the football games that year. As a licensed educator, I could not show up impaired, even though those were not my students. I could not show up impaired to those activities. If you are going on an overnight trip for maybe professional development, or you're attending, athletic events on an overnight trip, and you're acting in your capacity and representing the district, you cannot be under the influence, even in those activities.
Right. You always need to make sure that you're, setting a good example for the students on those trips and everything like that. Make sure that you're not, we've had it before where the teachers, they put the kids to bed for the night and they go start having some drinks. You can't do that,
So we have gone through the 8 standards. I will say our office does trainings. We go out to districts. We assist with the beginning admin trainings. If you're interested in, if you're an admin and you're interested in having us come do an hour presentation or a 2-hour presentation for your professional development, maybe in August, we'll give you a contact information at the end. And what you can say is, we have districts that we work with and they'll say, hey, can you come in and can you guys really focus on this social media component? And we really can beef that up for your school. So if you're having trouble with testing, we can beef that section up. So we can tailor our trainings to include more examples and some more practice for specific standards. So if you're interested, we do offer that. That's the fun part of our job. Investigating people at the worst possible time in their career is not the fun part, but is the bulk of it. So we showed you a little bit, or we showed you earlier our website. Here is kind of all of our dashboards. So all of these you can click on. There's trainings, the actual code of ethics is there, the PLSB history, our responsibilities, the rules and regulations governing the code of ethics is there. Educator discipline, that's going to get into where you saw this final state board orders, who the PLSB is. So the PLSB is a full board. Our ethics subcommittee, our members that serve from that full board. So state board orders, all of those things are available. That's on the DESE website. If you go to educator effectiveness and then the PLSB. So also, if you use this search that shows up at the top, you can find us there, or you can find us through offices and ed effectiveness. So these trainings are currently available to you on Arkansas Ideas. The new one that was out in 2020 is scenario based. So it's going to take you through different scenarios, and it really links how one incident could be multiple violations. So that one, the Code of Ethics training video really is kind of tailored more like this one, where it runs through the 8 standards, digital citizenship curriculum, K-12, and then social media guidelines. And that one is, I feel like that one's a really informative training. It was a speaker that we had previously at the ADE. So that one is great. We are expecting new trainings coming out in July for the Model Code of Ethics. So the Model Code of Ethics is kind of the national, help me Sarah, it's the national kind of standard, they're not standards, it's more of kind of guidance of kind of what we've been talking about, helping teachers with those gray areas that you will find yourself in. As you're building relationships with students, you're always going to
find yourself in gray areas. So it will help you kind of navigate those. It's the national standards. And then it takes you through some scenarios and some different things like that too. It's through ProEthica.
Yes, and so we're anticipating those are gonna roll out in July, and then coming soon are gonna be micro credentials for the actual 8 standards for Arkansas. So those are in the works. We don't have a timeline quite yet on when those would be released through Arkansas Ideas, but we do have some more stuff coming. And as administrators, if you have a teacher who is struggling in a certain area, you could assign them, pieces through the micro credentialing so that they could expand their knowledge and do some reflective practices. And I think we have a question.
Okay, so we do have a question, and if you guys are finished with this area, the question is going to be about standard 7.
Okay.
And maybe once I read this question to you all, that you can kind of go with, this is one of those questions that's where you guys will have the opportunity to get the correct standard. So this question says, if an administrator prefers or has a favorite staff member, and they're going to one of their favorites and trying to get or solicit information from another staff member, is that administrator violating standard 7?
So let me make sure that I understand. So
Understand the
you
question.
have an educator who has maybe a favorite staff member, and they're going to that staff member to say, hey, it's going to Sarah and saying, hey,
You got some scoop.
yeah, what's going on with Jacqueline? Why is she doing that? Okay, so that potentially could be a standard 7. I also see that maybe as a standard 2 in professionalism and maintaining those, are you operating in your professional capacity? With that, I will say, anyone can file, but when you do file, I want to make sure that we're clear that your name, the educator, the accused educator knows your name.
Yes.
They know who you are. So, if you feel that it is unethical, there's a difference in unprofessional and unethical. So if you feel that you're getting into an ethical situation, you may want to elevate it through your district. First, if you feel like you've already done that, then bringing it to the state level, because when we look at, when the ethics subcommittee looks at situations, they'll say, is this something that needs to impact their license? Or is this something that could have been handled at the district level? So to address your question, it potentially could be a standard 7 violation, potentially. It potentially could, really sounds a lot like a standard 2.
And also, if you ever have questions like that about specific situations, call Amy. She's our managing attorney. She's the director. She can talk you through that and help you decide whether or not that is something that needs to be filed, or if, maybe there's something at your district level that you can do prior to coming to us. We're always open for questions and everything like that. So we're going to give you a second to write down.
Absolutely, and her contact information is on the DESE website. But, like Sarah said, you can always call and ask questions, and if Amy's not available, one of us can help you.
Right.
To see if you've exhausted everything at your level.
Are there any other questions about the standards before we switch over to our case scenarios?
Yeah.
You can either type them in the chat or you can just say them out loud, whichever. Okay. All right, so we are going to switch.
I'm gonna stop sharing for just a second. And we are gonna switch over to, we have a Kahoot that we're gonna play
to take you through some of like the case scenarios and everything.
So how do we join?
Hit play and you're gonna team.
Just 1 second. Let's go ahead while we get this set up and switch over. Let's take just maybe like a 5-minute break, and we'll get this switched over, and then we'll be right back with you. Okay, we're starting to come back up, guys. I have here that we have 38 seconds. So, as we come back, we are going to, play a Kahoot. And so here's the code if you want to go ahead and get logged in.
And we have had a couple more questions come in during the break that people have sent directly to Vicky. So she is going to
Okay.
let us know
Yeah, we'll do
what
that
those
while we're
are as everyone's getting logged in. So Vicky, what were
Okay.
some of those questions?
So one of the questions was, can you have tobacco or alcohol in your car on the campus if it's just out in your car in the parking lots?
Okay, so can you have alcohol or tobacco in your car on campus?
Okay, so standard 8 says that it's on school premises and school property. So the answer to that would be no. You cannot have that in your car because the standard says an educator while on school premises or at a school-sponsored activity involving students refrains from. So that would be possessing alcohol or tobacco products. So nope, not even in your car.
There's another really good one here that says, it says student on student. If a student has assaulted a student on your campus, does that warrant a child maltreatment hotline call?
Okay, even if it is student on student, you still need to be calling the child abuse hotline, even student on student. It doesn't matter if it's student adult, or I'm sorry, adult student or student on student. You still need to be calling the child abuse hotline. But yes, that is a good question. We get that a lot.
And I would say, I would always err on the side of reporting rather than not reporting. I would always err on the side of reporting because at the call center, they are trained to determine if the call meets the criteria for investigation of maltreatment. So if you called and it was something that was not or something that needed to be reported, let them screen it out. But I always err on the side of, call and report because we would rather protect that student and protect those students rather than, something else happening to them.
Do you have any others, Vicky?
Is it acceptable to have wine at a restaurant? If there's students that are there, it says here, if student or parents can see you.
So I'm going to interpret that like this, and tell me if you think I'm wrong. So I'm out with my family. I'm having dinner. It's not school district time. Like this weekend. It was Memorial Weekend, so I was with my family. And like I said, I live in the area where I taught. Could I have a drink? Is that the situation that you think?
I think that's
Okay.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, you can have, teaching, we are held to a higher standard, but we are still people and still people that,
Right.
live in the community. Now, would I have so many drinks that I was getting to where I fall down? Absolutely not. But if I wanted to have a glass of wine with my dinner, that, you can do that. If you see students or I wouldn't approach them. I wouldn't interact with them. I wouldn't attempt to interact with them with their families if I had, had a glass of wine, but there's nothing that you can't, have a glass of wine.
Right.
Now, if you are on your professional development and students are not in the building, but you're on contract time and you go to lunch with your coworkers, no, because you are on contract time and you are, supposed to be working, even though there's no
Right.
student contact.
Or if you are out to eat with, like we said earlier, with your family and you're planning on going to the football game or the basketball game later, you would then be at a school activity sponsored.
Right,
So-
but like just this past weekend, absolutely, you could have a glass of wine, have 2 glasses of wine.
Okay.
Are there any other questions that we have at this time?
Have you, trouble getting on Kahoot?
Okay. It's kahoot.it. And then it should ask them for a pin.
I see that there's a couple more adding on.
Okay.
Um,
Here's what we can do, let's do a couple of those case scenarios, and then we can come back, so you guys can
okay,
keep.
so I do have a couple more questions coming in, so if y'all wanna go ahead and go through that, then.
And you may have more questions as we're going through the scenarios, so.
All right, now, Sarah gonna just tell me what to do here.
I should be able to just maybe click.
Okay,
Maybe not.
oh, starts.
It was hidden.
All right, here we go. We have our first one. An educator gives a student a ride home in their personal vehicle. Is this a violation of the Code of Ethics? Yes, no, not sure.
Ten seconds. Okay, so this is one of the gray areas where it's not real clear of whether or not you should be giving a student a ride home. There's a lot of different factors that can go into whether or not to give a student a ride home in your personal vehicle.
Now, let's talk, Sarah. So in the district where I taught, you could not, it was against district policy to give a student a ride home in their personal vehicle.
Okay.
In a situation like that, would that be a violation?
That
of the
would
code?
definitely be a violation. So if it is against your district policy, absolutely, then that would be a violation of the Code of Ethics. It would be standard 2 because that is your competence and professionalism. But if it is not against the district policy and it's raining and you see kids standing out in front of the school and their parents not there,
Right, and you
what
had
about that situation?
And you had another educator who went with you, there very few, stay outside of standard 8, it's not cut and dry, this is a violation, and this is not a violation. It really is gonna come down to kind of the facts, and that's where Sarah and I come in and we, in our investigative team, we do the investigating and find out. If we find out there is a district policy, when we send that back to the ethics subcommittee, they're gonna say, yes, this is a violation because you were trained on district policy and district policy told you not to. Okay, all right. Ooh, all right. An educator and a student are exchanging text messages. Is this a violation of the Code of Ethics? Yes, no, unsure.
Maybe. So we don't know what the text messages are about.
We don't know what time of day they are. Are they at midnight?
We don't know if we're using Snapchat or some other platform.
Right, so we just know, we're exchanging messages.
Right. And it's because of all those uncertainties that, again, it's a gray area. Now, if it is 1 o'clock in the morning and you're text messaging a student, it really doesn't matter what platform you're under.
Right.
Because 1 o'clock in the morning is an inappropriate time to be text messaging with a student. But say it's 5 o'clock and a student sends you a text message, say via GroupMe or something like that, asking a question about an assignment. That would be okay because you're communicating with them over an approved
Absolutely.
thing.
And so if you got into a situation where a student texts your personal phone and said, hey, I need, what about this assignment or whatever, you can establish boundaries and say, hey, I'm gonna respond back via email to you. Please use email to communicate for, so are you stopping that communication, or are you,
Continuing.
continuing it? And then it gets into, this is where we see students, they're educators, they get into slippery slopes with students. So it starts off talking about testing or assignments, and then it kind of
Yeah, like, hey,
snowballs.
what uniform am I supposed to wear
Right.
tomorrow? Things like that.
Another thing you can always do is reply back to that message and copy their parent on it. So add it to a group. And so you respond back to that student, and maybe I would respond to Sarah, and I would add her mom, and I would say, hey, remember the game is this time, you need to be wearing, your white uniform for this.
And then always probably take some kind of a copy, text, screenshot, whatever, just so that does not get lost, that if it does get sent into us, you have you have that record of that conversation there.
But making sure your communication with students and with their families is transparent.
Mhm.
All right.
An educator fails to report to the child abuse hotline. Is this a violation?
Yes, no, unsure.
Fails to report to the child abuse hotline.
All right.
Good job. Yay, everyone got it right. Yes. As an educator, remember, mandated reporting, like Jacqueline said a few minutes ago, err on the side of caution.
Absolutely. That's a standard 3. We have had this question before in the past, and let me just sidebar here for a second. So if you see someone violating a standard 8, are you mandated to report them to us as educators? So when you see someone violating the code of ethics, are you mandated to report it? And the answer would be, in one situation, if you are an administrator and you know of a sexual relationship, sexual contact, you are required to report it. But outside of that, you're not a mandated reporter for the code of ethics. So we do get that question sometimes because people seem to get them confused and interchange them. So let's do another.
You overhear 2 colleagues talking about a student that serves no educational purpose. What do? Join the conversation, ignore them, remind them that they should not be talking about the student, or you're unsure, you don't know what you would do. Jacqueline's gonna join the conversation.
No.
Because these are real, this is a real situation that you could find yourself in
Absolutely.
with your colleagues.
Absolutely. So the majority of you are going to remind them that we shouldn't be talking about this student. And with the ones that are unsure are probably people who aren't going to just rush up and say, you shouldn't be doing this. And you're unsure. If you have a situation like that, you may want to go back to them later and say, hey, this situation could be a violation. It could be something that would get us in trouble, or it could be something that would get you in trouble. You can always talk with your administrator about it. But you definitely don't.
Because some people don't feel comfortable in that,
Absolutely.
as they're gonna confront, you see 2 people and you're not just gonna feel comfortable going up to them and being like, hey, you don't need to be talking about the students in that way.
Absolutely.
So I understand where the ignore them person is coming from as well,
Absolutely.
because it is hard to confront your colleagues in that way.
And I see you kind of protecting yourself and not getting involved yourself with that. All right, moving along.
An educator inadvertently uploads nude photographs to a school computer. Is that a violation? So you have uploaded nude photographs, and this did actually happen.
So when we're thinking about this, a violation of the code of ethics is intentional.
Mhm.
It is intentional, but it doesn't, ignorance to the code of ethics does not exempt you.
Okay, so we had, most people were saying, yes, it was, and then some people said unsure. Okay, so it does not exempt you, but if it is a mistake, an honest mistake, like in this instance, the educator was plugging the phone in to charge and it accidentally synced. So it's unsure because there's a lot of different factors that go into that. You would think just by reading that it would be yes, that
But you're
is-
gonna look at student impact, and if you uploaded this and no student saw it and you immediately reported it to your principal and to the IT, that's a different situation than, than it being out there for students to see. So you really want to, kind of have even as embarrassing as it would be, to kind of have an open dialogue and, with your administrator and say, hey, this was my mistake. But we go back to kind of the foundation of it is keeping your personal life personal and your professional life professional. So having a professional Apple login. Create one that, don't sync it with your private or with your personal one that's connected to your cell phone so that it doesn't, bring over 2,000 pictures of my kids.
Right. And looking at this, it would be standard 4 because this is a school computer.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an accident, but say this educator tried to cover it up. They were like, oh my gosh, this happened. And they don't go tell IT or an administrator. Well, then that goes to their professionalism. So that then it would become standard 2 because you realized you made a mistake and you tried to cover it up.
Mm-hmm.
So always make sure that you do, like Jacqueline said, have that open dialogue communication. Okay. Okay, an educator is observed by a student using a vapor product on a school trip. Is this a violation?
So it's a school-sponsored event. You have student impact. Students saw it. Students saw it. But it's not on the school property. Huh.
Where is the student? Where's the teacher?
Right.
Yes. Yes.
So this one is going to be a standard 8. If when we investigate, it turns out that the student was factually reporting it, the educator did use the vapor product. I was on a school trip, so that one would be a violation.
Teacher changes a student's grade from a 59 to 60 so that student will pass their class. Is that a violation? Maybe they gave him a $100 gift card to Sonic.
Right. Yes. So there are some factors we would want to consider. Did an admin direct you to do this? To change a grade, and then the teacher changed it and an investigation came for the teacher. If someone, asks you to do this or tells you to do it, you would definitely, want to document it and want to document the reasoning behind it.
But it's still going to be a violation. And so those factors are just more going to be whether it's a mitigating, aggravating, different things like that. But that would be standard 3 because you have falsified a student's grade.
Absolutely. Okay. Number 8. During Teacher Appreciation Week, teacher received a $50 gift card. They're a great teacher. I did not get any $50.
This is an elementary school because high school teachers, you don't really get anything during the teacher appreciation.
Yes, they're a great teacher.
Maybe that's what makes it suspect, is that it maybe the files.
Right. Suspect because it's at the high school. So you just received it. Okay. And it is unsure. Okay, so remember our different factors that we said, the value, the timing, things like that.
Your district policies.
District policies. Does your district say you can't receive anything more than a $20 gift certificate? More than likely, it's probably going to be no, but it could potentially be a violation. If that student now has an A in the class, it doesn't matter if it was given to you during Teacher Appreciation Week because there appears to be that bias. Remember, it's the appearance of that bias when it comes to a Standard 5 violation.
So would it be okay if the teacher received the $50 gift card on Teacher Appreciation Week and there was no other bias shown, no other trace of any?
If there was no other bias, would it be a violation? Probably not.
No.
Unless it was against the school's policy. While collecting money for a school fundraiser, an educator, I can't talk today, misplaces $15. Okay, so we don't know what happened. Did they take it? Did a student take it? What happened to the $15? My team have walked in. Yes. Okay. You are the steward of that money. It is your responsibility under Standard 4 to ensure that that money is safe.
Absolutely.
Lock boxes, turning it in, make sure you're turning money in at the end of every day. Never keep money in your classroom overnight.
And this one goes to, school districts have policies in place for collecting money. And so, just misplacing $15 is not, it's not going to be, there's not really gonna be a valid excuse for misplacing when you have policies and procedures around collecting money and reporting money and turning money in.
An educator places a photo of her class on her social media page. Is that a violation?
So this is one I see a lot.
Yes. So your kids are doing one of those cutesy little projects and you're like, oh, how cute. And you take a picture and you put it on your social media page.
And I have really seen a lot where it's the end of the year and they posted a picture and they, I love these kids this year. They worked really hard. I saw a lot of that over the weekend. A lot of pictures of students.
So why is it unsure instead of just yes?
Okay, so it's really going to come down to your district policies. So the main takeaway today is know your district policies. But are you violating that student's, are you violating their confidentiality? Do you know that maybe they're not in a safe place or that they're hiding from someone, and then putting them out there on social media may give someone access back to them? Do you have explicit parent permission?
Is this your personal social media page, or is this a classroom social media page that you have set up specifically for your classroom?
Right. So there's going to be several factors that play into this. We have had situations where educators have been sanctioned because they had pictures placed on their personal social media of children who should not have been photographed, that they did not have permission to disclose their photographs.
Right. A lot of times students who are in foster care cannot have their picture placed on any type of social media. So again, know your district's policies. While walking down the hallway, you overhear another educator bullying a student. What do? Report to an administrator, confront the teacher, keep walking, unsure.
All right, so you're gonna report it to administrator. There are pretty strict laws and requirements around bullying. So you definitely want to report that.
Confronting the teacher, especially if the student is there. Now, I understand that you're wanting to protect that student and everything, but you also don't want to cause anything more to escalate and happen. Right. So go immediately to an administrator and report what's happening.
A student comes to your classroom crying, what do you do?
Speak with the student privately with the door closed. Speak with the student but leave the door open. Ask the counselor to join you in your room, or you don't know.
Now, I will say in an elementary setting, we have kids crying probably more frequently than they do in the high school setting. A lot of things happen on the playground. They don't get a turn or something. So when you're considering this, you're wanting to think about your behaviors and how you can mitigate risk. You can speak with the student and leave the door open. This game forces us to pick, obviously, one right answer. You can always ask another adult to join you just to protect you. But you don't want to bring the student in, close the door. If they have something that's private that they need to disclose, let's get them to the counselor. Let's get them into a situation where we can do that. You definitely want to give that student an opportunity to speak to an adult, but you want to mitigate your risk. And, could the student come back later and say that, something happened when the door was closed and it was just you two? And so just protecting yourself and protecting the student.
An educator leaves students unattended by stepping into the hallway during standardized testing. Is it a violation?
Everyone's answering very quickly. Everyone who has attended the testing trainings is answering very quickly.
Yes. Good job. Everyone got it right. Yeah. You just got out of testing season.
Yes.
An educator tells students the reason another student is absent because they are quarantined. Is this a violation? We had this more times.
We had numerous
This year. So can you tell other students that they're absent because they're quarantined, they're sick, anything like that? Yes. Okay. Very good. Yes. That is confidential information. That is protected. Standard 7. You are correct.
Okay.
An educator goes to their car during the school day and smokes a cigarette.
This one you should.
We answered it a second ago.
All right. Yes.
Very good.
Yep.
Smoking cigarettes, vapes, anything like that in your car would constitute a violation.
Absolutely.
Vicky wants you to hit next so that they can see
So,
the actual
okay.
results.
Okay.
It's a game.
Christy B coming in third. Chicken
Chicken
leg
leg.
coming in 2. And
Our winner?
Rain. Congratulations.
We have no prize.
Right. So we appreciate you all participating in that. I'm going to go back to this slide here.
Just so you can write our information down. Does anybody have any other questions? You can either say them out loud or you can send them. Do you have more that have been sent to you?
I had one.
Okay, let me get back to it.
can parents just call and make up lies about teachers? Or
Parents call and
Call
just
and
make
make
up
up
lies
lies.
about teachers. So when we receive,
We
we
get this a
do
lot.
not, we do not investigate off of a phone call. We have to have the allegation form, it has to be signed, we do validate it. Now, when we validate, do we know if the information is, true or not? What the subcommittee does is they look at it and they say, if everything in this was true, would this be a violation? So potentially, could something made up be authorized for investigation? Potentially. But it's not gonna be, I mean, we have had people on the phone before. I took a call one day and there was a gentleman who said that you need to come here and get this woman out of the classroom. She is yelling at kids. We really aren't in a position to do anything with that information. We referred him back to the district to where it could be stopped immediately. We are tend to be more on the tail end of things. So no, we do not just run out and investigate based off of phone calls and lies. Have there been situations where things that were not true were reported to us and the truth came out? Yes.
Yes.
And the educator, did not receive a sanction. They had proof that there was no evidence of these violations.
We don't get a lot of those allegations. Most of the time, it is true, or some version of the truth happened. Now, of course, if it's a parent, that's their baby,
Right.
they're gonna see things a little bit through that lens.
And so this kind of goes back into the conversation of protecting yourself and knowing the code of ethics and knowing, having good documentation. So we have had reports that someone knew about child maltreatment and didn't report it. And it was authorized because that is, if that was true, that would be a violation. And we called to talk to the educator, and the educator said, I called on this day at this time, here's the referral number. We verified the referral number. The case was dismissed with no preponderance of evidence.
Right. And I will also add to that, the parent complaints when they come in, yes, it is signed under penalty of perjury. Remember, we did go over that. Now, we can't, if a parent does just blatantly lie and there's really not a lot we can do on this end, but if it is an administrator or another educator who has signed that form and everything, penalty of perjury, and it's just lies, then remember that goes to your standard 3 reporting obligations, that you're not going to report false information to DESE. And that is what you've done. And so that would be a violation of standard 3 for an educator.
I've got another question.
Okay.
Can you go to explain to them about who the code of ethics applies to? This one is specifically a question for substitute teachers, but can y'all kind of go back over that and maybe the waivers again?
Absolutely.
Right.
So substitute teachers, it's going to depend. So as a licensed educator, I have friends who have taught and then took some time off, for various reasons, and are trying to get back into the district, and they are working as a substitute teacher, but they're licensed educators. They would fall under our jurisdiction. Someone who does not have a license but is just doing sub, like through Kelly Services or something like that, they would not fall under the jurisdiction of our office. If they are in a long-term sub position that required a waiver through DESE, they do fall under the jurisdiction of our office. We have educators who are on ALPs who are teaching out of area. They would fall under our office, even if they were at the time, maybe they were licensed as a special ed teacher, but they're teaching chemistry. You still would fall under that because you are a licensed educator. So it's going to be licensed educators in any capacity. So even I fall under the code of ethics, even though I'm not in the classroom with students at the Department of Ed. So if I was disclosing confidential information from this office, I could be subject to that standard, to standard 7 and to standard 2. So licensed educators in any capacity, those working under a waiver, so you're going to be like your charter schools, which are the Act 12 1240 waivers, your long-term sub waivers, the various waivers through the Department of Ed where they are requested at the district level. Those educators are gonna fall under it. And then your pre-service teachers who are enrolled in ed prep programs, who may be in your schools doing observations or doing some of their student teaching, they're gonna fall under this. But just general, I would say the majority of substitutes that I have come into contact with were not licensed, and so they would not fall in. So you definitely want to report, if it's suspected maltreatment, you want to always report it to the hotline. But if it's something else, you're going to want to report it to a district admin so that they can take it up with the service that is providing those subs.
Okay. Any other questions? You have any questions? No. Does anybody else have any questions? You can just ask them. You can put them in the chat.
All right. Well, we are actually about 30 minutes early, and so
We usually get more questions.
we usually have a lot of questions.
Are these?
So again, if you are interested in having us come to your district and do a specific professional development, we can do a 1 hour, we can do an hour and a half. We would be happy to come out. We like to be as proactive as we can be, because getting information to these educators, and I think one thing that when we altered the training this time, one thing that we forgot to put in, and I just realized it, is the average age of individuals that we investigate. And so typically when we ask that question, people say, oh, it's the new teachers, it's the ones fresh out of college. It's not. It's the teachers in my age bracket, which are in their 40s. They've been in the classroom for several years. They have, they're used to doing things a certain way or speaking to kids a certain way. And those are the ones really that fall in. I think our average age last year was 42.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the young ones that coming out of college. Which is what people tend to guess. So that, I think that's interesting, and I'll have to make a note to put that back in.
We need to add that.
Because that's something that we get a lot of questions.
If anyone wants to ask a question, you can either type it in the
Any
chat,
other questions that you have?
or along the bottom, you should see a reactions button. You can raise your hand and
So
we
yeah,
can call
so
on
if
you.
you're directed by your admin, someone that stated that they received a large gift card. If you're directed by your admin, it doesn't violate your district policies. Absolutely, I would document the day I received it, the day I talked to my admin, and then,
And if you went ahead and returned it, then document where you returned that gift card. And then if you do get turned in, then you can say, hey, look,
yeah,
I returned this even though my administration told me I could keep it.
absolutely.
So, yeah.
And I know that this is, so as a licensed educator, this is overwhelming, and you think, oh, there's so many things that can go wrong. There are, is it 20,000 licensed educators?
I think we're closer to 30 now.
We're getting close to 30,000. We have only received 115.
So it's a very small
So
percentage.
do I think that there's underreporting happening with the Code of Ethics? Probably so. But we typically don't run into the majority of educators, because the majority of educators are amazing. They're doing amazing things for kids. And it's not typical that you run into us.
Any other questions?
If you have questions, you can use the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and raise your hand. We can unmute you and you can talk, or you can put them into the chat like you've been doing, either one. While we're waiting for some of those questions to come in, I do want to point out, a lot of times I know teachers will get together in a room and watch these trainings as a group. If you've been on these trainings with me before, I appreciate that. I'm glad to have y'all watching as a group. I think that cultivates rich discussions. But if the person who is logged in, whoever's name is on the screen right now, if you will just send me an email and let me know who is in your room, I'll make sure that everyone gets credited and gets certificates. I've had a couple emails. Some of my repeat offenders have already emailed me, but if you'll just make sure and let me know who's in your room. I'm not seeing any questions. Ladies, are y'all getting any on your end?
We're not seeing any, but if you, we do kind of keep track for our training purposes. So if people could just drop in the chat, your role.
If you do have multiple people in your,
Are you classroom teachers? Are you admin? Who are you?
are you DESE? We've seen a couple of DESE people.
And if you do have a group, just a group.
Yeah.
How many people are in your group?
Federal coordinator, principals.
Okay, so seeing a lot of admin, counselors,
Classroom teachers.
classroom teachers.
Okay,
Okay,
substitute.
Desi. That helps us. Thank you so much.
I will put back in the chat the links that we used at the beginning for the evaluation. It also does ask for your position. So if y'all don't mind to fill out that Google form evaluation, I'll be sure and share that with the PLSD ladies. And then also I'll make sure and put my email address in case you need to email me for either to let me know that you weren't registered or to let me know who was in your room.
And we hope you all have a wonderful summer and are able to rest and take some time. And like we said, if you have any questions, you can find us on the DESE website and we will be happy to talk you through different situations.
All right, if you have got all the links out of the chat that you need, thank you ladies for joining us, Jacqueline, Sarah, and I'm sorry, I lost the name of the person who's off screen. Who's your?
Vicki.
Vicki Jennings.
Vicki Jennings. Thank you guys. Y'all were great.
Thank you for all your help. Y'all have done a great job. I should have put an anonymous name in the Kahoot. I don't think I did as well as I needed to.
That's okay. When we were researching, we found Georgia, we were looking at their code of ethics and they have actually a course that they go through. And I took the quiz that comes along with a 50-point quiz, and I would not be licensed in Georgia. So they have some very specific rules as to like tutoring and how you can charge. And so it's, code of ethics is not something that is required by each state. And it's not something that's consistent across each state. So ours are kind of more general, broad topics where, like, for instance, Georgia has it nailed down to, if you tutor a student that is in your classroom, that you're the teacher of record, you have to do X, Y, and Z. So it's a code of conduct versus a code of ethics and ethical behavior. So it's very interesting to see what's really going on in the US. And that's where the model code comes in to try to give us a common language to go to from state to state, but really we're all out here doing our own thing.
Doing our best.
Well, and I like the distinction that you made between the reporting for mandated reporter and reporting for code of ethics. I guess I would have thought of that had I really thought about it, but I guess I didn't think about the distinction between the two. And you're right, I've been on a couple trainings with other states about child maltreatment, and our laws in Arkansas are different than a lot of other states for that as well. So,
and it's very interesting when you start looking at the different states and what everyone does and how they handle investigations around those things. But we really appreciate you all coming, especially the Tuesday after a holiday. To talk ethics, because I know that's not always the most popular topic.
This is the dedicated group of ethical teachers. That's what we're gonna name ourselves.
On the Google list.
Thank you all for joining us. Go ahead and pop off if you're done, and this will be recorded. It will be posted on the DESE webpage. And once I get certificates cleaned up, I'll send everyone emails. If y'all been on, you know, you'll always get a follow-up email from me. So thank you. Have a great week. Have a great summer, and we'll see y'all around, or if not, we'll see you in August.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
you.